God never said you need to have an impressive faith, but that little faith of yours needs to be backed by action. That single line rewrites everything most people believe about why their prayers feel unanswered and why their mountains stay standing. The assumption buried in so many tired and worn-out hearts is that more faith produces more results, that the reason nothing has shifted yet in their lives is simply because they have not believed hard enough. But Jesus did not say that to the disciples when they came to him asking why they could not cast out a demon. He did not say you need more faith, he said you need something real, something living inside of you and planted, even if it is only the size of a seed. What Jesus actually said. In Matthew 17, the disciples came to Jesus privately after failing to heal a boy who had been suffering severely. They asked him directly why they could not do it. His answer was not a rebuke of their quantity of faith. It was a clarification of its nature. He said, "If you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Matthew 17 verse 20, NKJV, a mustard seed, for anyone unfamiliar with it, is one of the smallest seeds known to the ancient agricultural world. Jesus was not using impressive imagery here. He was using the most unimpressive seed he could find as his example, and he was saying that even that, genuinely held, genuinely planted, is sufficient to move what looks permanently fixed. Luke records a version of the same teaching in Luke 17 verse 6, where Jesus uses the image of a mulberry tree, one of the most deeply rooted trees in that region, being uprooted by faith the size of a seed and obeying. The detail matters. Jesus keeps choosing the most stubborn, most immovable things in his hearers' world, mountains and deep-rooted trees, and placing them under the authority of something tiny and seemingly fragile. If you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, "Be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea," and it would obey you. Luke 17 verse 6, NKJV, he is not describing something that makes logical sense. He is describing the logic of the kingdom, where size and impressiveness have never been the point. The seed does not know it is small. A mustard seed planted in hard ground does not hesitate because the soil is difficult. It does not assess the conditions and decide it is too small to try. It simply does what a seed does. It goes down before it goes up, works in the dark before it ever reaches the light, and what it eventually produces is entirely out of proportion to what it started as. Jesus makes this point directly in another passage, Matthew 13 verse 31 to 32, where he describes the mustard seed growing into a tree large enough for birds to nest in its branches. The ending is not just growth but abundance that provides shelter for others. What begins as the smallest thing in the garden becomes a home for things that did not plant themselves there. This is the pattern of kingdom faith. It does not begin impressively but honestly. It begins with someone who has very little, planting the little they have, and trusting that what happens next is not their responsibility to manufacture. Trusting God with what feels like not enough. You may have been living with a quiet, persistent belief that your faith is not enough to qualify you for what you have been praying about, but the mustard seed does not qualify by its size, it qualifies by its nature. A seed contains within it everything it needs to become what it was designed to be. The information for the tree is already inside the seed. The capacity for the impossible is already inside the faith God has given you, however thin it feels right now. Hebrews 11 verse 1 says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance and evidence. God is looking for something real enough to plant. Something honest enough to go down into hard ground and keep going before it sees any light. That is the kind of faith God works with. Not the kind that has never doubted, but the kind that doubted and showed up anyway. Not the kind that feels enormous and unshakable, but the kind that is genuinely, quietly, stubbornly in the ground. The ground does not have to feel ready. Hard ground is not a sign that the seed will fail. Many of the greatest things God has grown in human lives were planted in seasons that felt completely hostile to growth. Joseph planted faithfulness in a prison. Paul planted a church in a city that wanted him gone. Ruth planted loyalty in a foreign land where she had no standing and no guarantee of what would come of it. None of those grounds looked ready. None of those conditions looked favorable, and in every case, what grew was completely out of proportion to what was planted and completely out of reach of what the planter could have produced on their own. God has not asked you to produce the harvest, He just asked you to plant the seed. The difference between those two assignments is enormous. One requires you to have something impressive to offer. The other requires you to have something real to release. You can release what is real even when it feels small. You can trust God with what feels like not enough, because not enough in your hands is a different calculation entirely when it is placed into His. The seed in your hand is already enough. You may have spent a long season looking at the size of your faith and deciding it does not qualify. Looking at the mountain still standing in your life and concluding that something must be wrong with what you are bringing to God. But Jesus was precise in Matthew 17 verse 20. He did not say if you have great faith. He said if you have faith as a mustard seed. What you are holding right now, the worn and honest and sometimes barely there faith, that has kept you returning to God even when nothing was moving, is not disqualified. It is a seed and it contains within it everything God planted in it when He placed it in you, and seeds do not need the farmer to fully understand their contents in order to produce. Plant what you have and trust the God who designed it. The mountain has already heard its instructions. The tree already knows it can be moved. What God is waiting on is not a bigger offering from you, but on the seed that is already in your hand to be placed in the ground, and that mustard seed faith is enough. Today's post was titled The Mustard Seed Faith. Share it with someone close to you now. God bless you.